Hey guys, I hope you're all having an amazing day. September is here and we have some pretty important Star Wars news. The situation concerning The Acolyte keeps getting stranger. I've already laid out my grievances with the show, and despite it being long over and cancelled, we're still getting brand new developments. Now you've probably heard, there was a lot of drama, actors came out, responded to the cancellation, Amanda Stenberg put out an 8-minute video, and I don't really want to get into all of that, but instead, I want to talk about the unfortunate situation which I've not seen anyone else really talk about in depth, of the tie-in Acolyte material to come, and its fate. Because while the show's been cancelled, there are more stories from it to come. Disney and Lucasfilm did not renew for a second season. For all intents and purposes, The Acolyte was canned. It's done. But before that cancellation, they already had a full lineup of various tie-in projects that were going to connect to the show. We're talking about comics, 2 standalone novels about Vanestra Rowe, Jekki, Yord, and there are also some toys coming out. So, I don't think Disney expected the response The Acolyte received, because clearly they planned for more. And it turns out, again, terrible coincidence, terrible timing, a preview for the Kelnacca standalone Acolyte comic has been released just days after the show was scrapped. The story gives us some of Kelnacca's journey before The Acolyte. The comic is hitting the stands next week, and a preview includes a closer look at the story. And the most sad thing about this is hearing the enthusiasm, whether it's in the synopsis on their website, or comments from the authors and illustrators. Lucasfilm expected a much bigger reception, and not only was there not much praise, we also saw the death of anticipation, and I have no doubt this tie-in material is going to be met with an equal amount of apathy. I'm not saying there are no Acolyte fans, but they certainly were a minority. It's by far the least popular series, and that's just from a viewership perspective. And if you're taking into account the fans of the show themselves, they've been pretty disheartened that there's been no official word from Disney or Lucasfilm about this. And even just looking at this comic preview, reading the synopsis, it seems obvious that while the character of Kelnacca is dead, and therefore wouldn't have appeared in a season 2 if they'd made it, they expected a better reception for the character, enough to warrant a standalone comic issue. So let's take a look. Let's take a brief look. I'll just go through the meat and potatoes of the comic. And the sad thing is, having read a couple of pages myself, it doesn't even seem that bad. Dare I say treats his character with more nuance? Let's take a look. So it's all about Kelnacca's Padawan, as an elderly Jedi Master remembering the first time they met, and the kind of master the Wookiee Jedi was, 100 years before the events of the show. It even possesses a shade of tragedy because the reason this Padawan, whose name is Yazion, was assigned to Kelnacca in the first place is because he lost his first master in the Starlight Beacon disaster. Kelnacca was a first responder to the wreckage on Yazion's world, and part of the rescue mission from Coruscant. Meet Kelnacca, part of the relief effort from Coruscant. I'm sure you're going to get on famously. Sure. I mean, yes. Very pleased to meet you, Master Kelnacca. And the comic will explore more of Kelnacca's personality. At first, the 2 characters, him and his new Padawan, didn't really get on very well. The Wookiee is a little bit stubborn and kind of sassy, just walking away from this Padawan. I can imagine there is very little communication between the two. Kelnacca seems like the kind of Jedi who leads by example, rather than words. I've always loved the idea of Wookiee Jedi, and you guys know in the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch, I've spoken about how much I love the character of Gungi. But it's going to be interesting the response to this comic. I don't mean to sound pessimistic, but I can't imagine too many fans being too excited about it. With the exception of the Crimson Reign comics and the upcoming Battle of Jakku trilogy, Marvel Star Wars comics have been pretty much in decline for a few years now. I wouldn't be surprised if this one doesn't do too well either. In response to the silence from Lucasfilm, fans from both sides of this debate have said enough is enough. Lucasfilm need to make statements themselves, and not rely on Deadline, The Hollywood Reporter, and others. The official Star Wars social media accounts went straight to Star Wars Outlaws. They didn't provide any statement on the show's cancellation themselves. It's a pretty bizarre situation we find ourselves in. But moving on to some other Star Wars news. Following the release of Jedi Fallen Order, Cal Kestis actor Cameron Monaghan was asked on a multitude of occasions if he wants to see his character make his way to Disney+. And while we await the 3rd Jedi game, which I think has to come out before Cal Kestis does make that jump, the actress who plays the protagonist of the brand new Star Wars game that came out on Friday, Star Wars Outlaws, was asked the exact same question. And unlike Cameron, who's given pretty vague responses over the last 5 years, Humberly González, Vess's voice actress, shared how she wants to see the game made into a series or film for Disney+. And you might be saying, well, that's ludicrous. Star Wars is already failing after The Acolyte. Do fans really want to see this? Well, it turns out there are many ways they could integrate it. If she survives the original trilogy time period, there's a pretty solid chance Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni might want to incorporate some of the video games and their characters into the New Republic. And remember guys, she's been on Tatooine, she's met the Pikes, she's been involved with various syndicates, and has come across another character who goes on to survive the Battle of Endor, Kira, the leader of Crimson Dawn. So is there a chance that Vess is going to be the key to going from spaceships to streaming? Could her story be the link between video games and the live action content? Here's what she said. I think it'd be incredible to see Vess in live action, because one thing that we don't see in animation is those micro-expressions of a real human being on screen. And it would be incredible for me to experience what it would be like to be in her costume, in her appearance, her likeness, in the landscape, to see her interact with real characters. She says it would be a dream come true. Given the success of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, video game movies are seeing something of a renaissance. So who is to say Disney and Lucasfilm can't do the same thing, and do something cross-media with Vess? But there is one major factor going against this possibility, guys. After a couple of days, analysts have concluded the sales forecast looks grim. Ubisoft originally targeted 718 million in bookings for the second quarter, but the estimate has now been lowered to 553 million. The Financial Times concluded Ubisoft desperately needs Star Wars Outlaws to be a big hit, but the game's non-existent hype paints a concerning image for the company. They were originally aiming for 10 million copies to sell, then it reduced to 8, and now they're forecasting the sale of just 5 million copies this quarter. And outside of a small online circle of Star Wars gamers, I've not seen this game get much hype. I outlined my issues with the game on Wednesday, but I think the story potential is there. And considering all these syndicates, considering the way all of the underworld kind of comes together, the game has done something which respects some of the original vision of 1313, and to a greater extent, what the Book of Boba Fett should have given us. But issues are still prevailing with Star Wars Outlaws. The sheer amount of backlash and criticism has forced Ubisoft to disable YouTube comments. They're ignoring the criticisms instead of acknowledging them. I think what is really concerning is when there are plenty of gameplay issues, glitches, then you factor in the exorbitant price. You think the first thing would be to allow fans to vent these issues and to bring them up with the company, but instead, they're deciding to ignore feedback. The main criticism I've seen in the last 24 hours is that the game drops to as low as 720p to achieve 60 frames per second. Frustrations have been completely valid. We're not talking about out-of-world criticisms. But that is the latest news, my dear friends. Share your thoughts on all of it in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.